The morning of September 10, 1780, began with dust. Colonel William Baillie stood at the head of nearly 4,000 men, marching through the Tamil countryside toward Conjeeveram, confident that within hours he would shake hands with General Hector Munro and merge two armies into one unstoppable force. British discipline, British cannon, British certainty. Nothing about this march suggested catastrophe. Then, the guns opened up. Not from where anyone expected, not from an enemy anyone respected. And within 4 hours, one of the most disciplined military machines on the subcontinent would be broken into pieces, captured, slaughtered, or scattered into the dust it had marched through that morning. This is the story of how that happened, and why, decades later, people still call it one of the worst defeats the East India Company ever suffered on Indian soil. To understand it, you have to understand the man who engineered it, a ruler the British had underestimated for years. Hyder Ali began his career not as a king, but as a soldier of uncertain birth, clawing his way up through the ranks of Mysore's army through sheer battlefield instinct rather than noble blood. He had no formal education. He could barely read. What he had instead was something rarer, an obsessive understanding of how enemies think and how to make them think wrong. By 1780, Hyder commanded an empire stitched together through relentless calculation. And when war broke out again with the British, he made a decision that looked, on paper, like madness. While besieging the fort at Arcot, he split his forces, sending his son, Tipu Sultan, to intercept Baillie's column alone. Why weaken your own siege? Why send your heir into a fight without you? Because Hyder already knew something the British didn't. This was never going to be one battle. It was going to be a trap with two jaws. Munro, meanwhile, believed he held every advantage. His army was larger, his guns were heavier. He had beaten far bigger forces before. So when Hyder appeared to abandon his position, tents left standing, campfires still burning. As if the army had simply vanished, Munro read it as retreat, as fear. It wasn't fear, it was bait. While Munro hesitated near Conjeeveram, wasting the hours Baillie needed most, Hyder Ali quietly mounted his war elephant and rode to join his son. Two Mysorean forces became one, and Baillie's column, expecting reinforcement, was walking straight into it. Near the village of Pollilur, the road opened into a wide plain. A small pagoda marked the village ahead, and waiting in the open ground was Tipu's artillery, already ranged, already loaded. The cannons tore into Baillie's column before his men had even finished forming their lines. Baillie himself was struck in the leg by a cannonball in the opening exchange and kept commanding anyway, propped up on a palanquin, refusing to be carried off the field. His men pulled into a defensive square, the classic British answer to being outnumbered, a wall of bayonets facing outward in every direction. Disciplined enough, in theory, to survive anything. They held that morning through sheer nerve. Baillie's officers pushed forward, trying to seize enemy guns. For a while, it looked as though British discipline might grind out a victory, the way it always had. Then came the moment that decided everything. A shell no one recorded who struck one of the British ammunition wagons. It detonated in the middle of the formation. Smoke, fire, shredded men. A hole tore straight through the square's front line, the one formation the entire battle plan depended on staying unbroken. For a heartbeat, chaos. For Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, watching from horseback, it was the signal they had been waiting for. Cavalry surged into the gap. Not a slow advance, a flood. At the same moment, Mysorean rocket men unleashed a weapon the British had never faced in this form before. Iron-cased rockets faster and longer ranged than anything Europe was using, screaming into the wounded square and igniting fresh panic among men and horses alike. The formation that had survived hours of cannon fire couldn't survive this. It cracked open. Soldiers who had stood shoulder to shoulder all morning were suddenly fighting alone, surrounded. with nowhere to retreat. Munro's rescue force, delayed by Haider's earlier deception, was still miles away. When Munro finally advanced and fired signal guns to announce his approach, no one answered. The battle was already over. A wounded sepoy stumbling from the wreckage was the first to tell him what had happened. More followed, each one confirming the same impossible truth. Baillie, wounded and out of options, surrendered his sword to spare what remained of his men from annihilation. The abandoned camp that had looked like weakness. The son sent to fight without his father. The vanished army that seemed to be retreating. None of it had been mistakes. Every piece had been positioned to produce exactly this moment. When the smoke cleared, the numbers told their own story. Of roughly 3,800 British and company troops engaged, hundreds lay dead, and hundreds more were dragged into captivity, marched toward the fortress of Seringapatam. Baillie himself would never see freedom again. He died in captivity more than 2 years later in November 1782. A French officer serving nearby, watching the aftermath, put it simply, there was not, in all of India, an example of a similar defeat. The shockwaves reached far beyond the battlefield. This wasn't a skirmish lost at the edges of empire, it was the East India Company's worst field disaster in India up to that point. A humiliation that reached London and forced Governor-General Warren Hastings to scramble reinforcements under General Hector Munro just to stabilize the south. Pollilur exposed something the British hadn't wanted to admit. Their military supremacy in India was not guaranteed. It could be planned around, outthought, and broken. There's a reason military historians still study Pollilur alongside history's great encirclements, a South Indian echo of Canny, where deception and terrain turned a smaller force into an unstoppable trap. And there's a longer shadow too. Those iron-cased Mysorean rockets that tore through Bailey's Square would later inspire the British to develop their own rocket weapons technology, born, ironically, from the day rockets were used against them. Today, the plain near Pollilur is quiet farmland, the kind of place you could drive past without knowing what happened there. But the memory didn't disappear. Inside Tipu Sultan's summer palace, a mural still stretches across the wall, painted not long after, showing the battle in vivid color. A father and son's greatest victory, preserved in plaster for anyone willing to look. It's easy to remember empires by the wars they won. Pollilur is worth remembering because of what it proved. Even the most confident army can be led, piece by piece, into a trap it never saw being built. And if you're drawn to stories where intelligence beats firepower, and where the smartest man on the field wins before the first shot is fired, this is exactly the kind of history worth following.